at first when a choir reads through it, they're like, what is that? Yeah, it's like, sing what's on the page. It's right. And then they
I'm glad you have that problem too. My God.
Welcome, everyone. My name's Janaea Robison. I'm the Artistic Director for the National Lutheran Choir, and I'm joined today by two fantastic individuals, composer Taylor Scott Davis and publisher Steve Bock. And we are excited to be presenting the third of three Christmas suites so far. The National Lutheran Choir will be giving the world premiere at our Christmas Festival concerts this year. So welcome, you two. We're so glad to have you here and talk a little bit about the Christmas Suites projects.
The Christmas Suite started as an idea in my head probably 10 years ago. I had gone to a concert and they had performed The Many Moods of Christmas, a classic Christmas piece. And I thought, why has nobody done this in 60 years? So I started rolling around in my head, okay, what would that have to look like? What would that have to sound like to be relevant to 21st century ears? What Bennett did was something that sounds very mid-20th century Broadway. That was the defining sound of the mid-20th century, especially for America. But we now have moved to a cinematic sound. The way that our culture has evolved, how can you be a fan of music and not understand John Williams? You have major symphony orchestras playing Star Wars suites. That 50 years ago, that was unheard of. The music that has come out of Hollywood and out of cinema really is, it has become the defining sound of really the last 50 years. We needed to find someone who could bridge that gap, who understood what we were trying to do from just the project standpoint, but also could speak that cinematic language. And that's how we approached Taylor, who definitely understands, is of that generation and speaks that language and writes in that sound. And we felt like Taylor's the guy.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Taylor, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I grew up, not metaphorically, literally under a piano, because my dad is a musician. My diet was equal parts, Schubert Mass in G or whatever Rudder's newest thing was. And then just every jazz standard you could think of. I think most importantly, my parents never said no. Like the invitation to create was always there. One thing led to another, and I decided I'd see if I could make a career of it. So here we are.
You also are a church musician, right?
I am at St. Andrew Methodist in Plano, which is North Dallas. The church gig is full-time, and I love those people, and I appreciate their appetite for trying stuff out. I have this group of lab rats, and I throw stuff in front of them. I'm like, hey, how does this sound? It's a real gift to have a group of people like that. You're always mindful as a writer of kind of the lowest common denominator, because that's choir. You're writing for people who are sitting side by side, a degreed musician and somebody who just avocationally loves singing and can't imagine themselves not contributing in some form, whether that's at a church or a community chorus. And you have to make things work for both of those capabilities.
So speaking of church work, Steve, I've known of your father, Fred Bock, since I was, a kid.
My father, Fred, not only started the publishing company, but he was also a writer, a composer, arranger. He was the editor of hymnals, and he was a choir director and organist and at Hollywood Presbyterian Church, which is where I grew up. I sang in children's choirs and youth choirs, and then I left the farm and went to the film business for 15 years. when my father died unexpectedly back in 1998, that's when I came back to the family business.
The initial intent of this project was just slightly different when we first came together.
Besides shifting from a Broadway to a Hollywood sound, the thought occurred to me, why did Shaw and Bennett put the carols together the way that they did? Because that's the way Shaw wanted it. You know, I mean, he's Robert Shaw, so you do what Robert says. But outside of that, there is no rhyme or reason to why these carols are together. And I thought, okay, well, if we're going to do this, then we really should be collecting these carols and marrying them up in a way that makes sense, that people could look at this and say, oh, I see what you guys are doing. So the original idea was to corral them along cultural lines. You would have a collection of English carols or German carols or American carols or French carols. Marrying them up thematically instead makes them much more pleasing to both the singers and to the audience, so that you would have carols about bells. And so we would put those together in a suite of carols about bells. And you end up with Ring Out Wild Bells, suite number 2.
The best thing that we did was really digest Steve's idea of this sounding more Hollywood and less Broadway. These big brassy sections that kind of sound like what metallic wrapping paper looks like on Christmas morning as it's being thrown through the air. And then we've got more soaring string parts and a real creative and colorful use of percussion. But all of that really comes from understanding the limitation of what the typical Hollywood sound is. It's really submitting yourself fully to the idea that you're not going to step out of the style, that the style is going to guide every decision that you make.
So the third Christmas suite, these were carols that all have some sort of nod to nature and heaven. So Heaven and Nature Sings obviously directly comes from Joy to the World, but we have Good King Wenceslas, and that talks about, looking out, on the natural world. Angels We Have Heard on High. This one, though, is going to be premiered by the National Lutheran Choir, and we don't typically perform with a symphony orchestra for our Christmas festival. All of them are done with different orchestrations, but for this one specifically, it really is very conducive to doing it in a church.
It was good that we started this one with the understanding that the National Lutheran Choir would do the premiere. And once again, the idea of limitation immediately popped up because it wasn't going to be done by full orchestra. How could we make a full version that doesn't sound diminished in any way when it's done in its medium-sized version? I'm very excited about this middle-sized version that you all are doing, because I think, in the church world, we have access to brass players and organists, and that just seems like a very natural fit for the season.
At first when a choir reads through it, they're like, what is that? Yeah, it's like, sing what's on the page, it's right. And then they
I'm glad you have that problem too. My God.
There will be a couple of notes where there's these just non-harmonic tones, that then they sing it and they go, oh, I get it. It's gorgeous. In the bleak midwinter, especially in the middle of this suite, is luscious.
It's such a prayerful carol, and even if somebody's not a believer, you could say that it's a very plaintive carol. It's this incredibly authentic and kind of raw carol, and I don't know why I'm so attracted to that, but you can hear a kid singing the melody line, or you could imagine a small collection of singers who just want to come together and singing that, and it just feels right. One of the things that will be unique to Suite 3, because it's not so in Suites 1 and 2, is that audience participation.
For people who will come to concerts where these works are programmed, the National Lutheran Choir, it definitely feels much more like a worship event. It's something that you hear these and you go, yeah, I feel like, okay, I get to stand now. I know at least the first 8-12 words of this tune. So there is something to that corporate communal assembly singing that is special for Christmas. We have a website dedicated to the Christmas suites, and it is christmassuites.com to see and to be able to hear Suites 1 and 2 and more information about if you want to perform them. We're excited for you to be able to hear the world premiere of the third Christmas Suite by Taylor Davis on December 13th and 14th for the National Lutheran Choir Christmas Festival at the Basilica of St. Mary in Minneapolis, Minnesota.